Hello, welcome back to the Retro Horror Academy. My name is Daniel Richardson, and tonight we're going to be talking about the year in horror 1936. Guys, it finally happened. The censors won. Horror officially dies this year. Don't worry, because like with anything else in horror, or horror related, you can't kill it. It's going to come back. But unfortunately, 1936 is the last year for a couple years that we have anything horror related. Dracula's Daughter is actually the last major horror film to be released before this cycle of horror films kind of runs its course. You want to call it the Golden Age? You can. The Golden Age of horror runs its course, and we're kind of without horror for a couple years. But let's get into it. You know what we do on this show? We got some Horror Hall of Fame inductees. And we got 9 films to rank, I guess. So let's just get into it, shall we? So, following the trend that we've been doing for the past couple years on this thing, well, past couple shows, we're covering years. We're going to go ahead and induct 2 people into the Horror Hall of Fame. So the first person we're going to induct is Washington Irving. Author, biographer. He was also like a ambassador for Spain, actually, which is kind of crazy. But and he, like I said, biographer. He did biographies of George Washington, Christopher Columbus, among others. But us horror fans, we know him best as the author of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which led to the movie The Headless Horseman. Of course, there would be other things, adaptations as time will pass, but at this point in history, that's what he's known for. But guess what? That's all you need. You do the Headless Horseman, guess what? You're in the hall. So Washington Irving, welcome to the Horror Hall of Fame. Well deserved. Take your seat, sir. The next person, see if I get this name right without butchering it too much. Werner Krause. German actor, best known in the world of horror as Dr. Caligari in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. He was also in Waxworks and The Student of Prague, always playing a sinister type character. Again, in these early days of horror, and this is kind of before Lon Chaney really burst onto the scene. He was the guy in Germany that was just dominating these horror roles, these sinister roles. So, Werner Krause, welcome to the Horror Hall of Fame. So let's get into it, guys. We have 9 horror films that we're going to rank. So, at number 9, El Barrio Macabro. This is a Mexican film, also known as The Macabre Trunk. This is about a mad scientist who, his wife is dying, and so in order to try to help her illness, he's killing young women and then taking their blood and pumping them into his wife to try to save her. I'm not gonna lie. This was the year of. We've been in it for a while now. I know it's horror goes in cycles, but we're definitely in the era of mad scientists. But this doesn't end just now. We go through the 40s up to the 50s and beyond. But I kind of feel like these next 2 decades are just going to be mad scientist crazy, and I don't know. I kind of feel like it runs its course. For me personally, anyways. I feel like, what do you do after Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein? Like, at that point, we've already seen the tropes. We know the formula. And I'm not saying there won't be good ones. In fact, even on this list, because we got several mad scientist stories on this list this year, and we got some really good ones. I'm just saying, what else can you really do at this point? Besides the point, let's get on to this movie right here. This one felt very standard. I don't know. I guess the way the formula goes. This one, though, it felt kind of rushed, like they were kind of rushing through the story. I mean, it's a short film. It's only an hour and 20 minutes or something, but it's like they were just kind of rambling this thing together and don't really get any steam going until like the last part of it, which seemed to also be kind of a theme throughout this year in horror. Yeah, I don't know what else to really say about this one. I didn't really care for it, and that's kind of a shame because we've had a handful of other Mexican horror films. The Convent. I forget what the full title of it was because it had several titles, but like the Haunted Convent or El something Conventio or whatever the hell that one was called. I really enjoyed it. El Fantasmo del Convento. Yes, I love the Phantom of the Convent. I love that one. I thought that was honestly one of my favorite movies that we've done here. And there's been a couple of other Mexican horror films from this era that I've really enjoyed. This is the first one that I felt was kind of a miss. And again, it just felt very generic and by the numbers. And I think that's really what kind of, because whereas the other ones, maybe watching them from today's perspective, you're like, oh yeah, these tropes, this is standard stuff. But it was like it was fresh back then. This one didn't even feel fresh. Like we've already seen this movie play out numerous times. So I don't know. I'm kind of yearning for the haunted house where it turns out to be a person. The old Scooby Doo haunted house type movies, because that was kind of the rage in the late 20s there. And now it's like, oh, now we're all about mad science and. I don't know. This has a 5.7 on IMDb, and yeah, that feels a little high if you ask me, but that's just my opinion. So yeah, number 9, El Burro Macabro, if I'm even pronouncing that right. Number 8, we have, see if I can get this one, Ferryman Maria. This is a German film. It's about this young girl who kind of goes into a small town, a small village, and becomes the ferryman, which is what Ferryman is translated to, Ferryman Maria. And anyways, it ends with her basically fighting death to try to save the man she loves. This, very similar to Destiny, the F.W. Maroon. I'm horrible with names, guys. I'm sorry. Manu, the guy who did Nosferatu, he also did Destiny, and they had a very similar story in that one as well, about someone trying to protect their loved ones from death. And so must be a German thing, I guess. Anyways, this movie would later get remade. Of course, this one was more gothic horror, that German expressionistic, type look. Whereas the remake, which was 1945, I believe, is Stranglers on the Swamp or Strangler of the Swamp or something like that. But they definitely went more horror with that one, whereas this one was more atmosphere, I guess you would say. Really, the only other note as far as production goes on this movie was, or anything of note, I guess I should say, was this was the last movie that was made in Germany before the Nazi regime kind of took over the film industry as well. In fact, the director, a guy named Frank Wisbar, I think is how you pronounce his name, this guy would actually flee from Germany shortly after making this movie to get away from the Nazi power, stranglehold they had over there. I like this movie. I actually, this is a movie I really kind of got into. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the others. Not necessarily with the twist or anything like that. No one's dead or anything like that, and they don't realize it. I just mean like that isolation, and you don't quite know what the fuck's going on the outside. There's, when the man she falls in love with, because again, we see early on. Spoilers alert! This is from 1936. So you should have already seen it, or should go out of your way to see these before you listen to this podcast. But anyways, in the very beginning, we get the first ferryman, and we see Death show up, and capture him, his soul, or whatever you want to call it. And so when this guy, the soldier, shows up and goes into the ferryman's house, which is now Maria's house. And we see Death coming, he's freaking out. We don't quite know what's going on the outside. And I just instantly just thought of, not only did I think of, Destiny, but I also thought of the others. Had that kind of a vibe. I really dug it. Like I said, horror, bit of a stretch, I guess. I mean, it is supernatural. It definitely has more of like a love story, drama kind of vibe to it. But still solid nonetheless. And again, I mean, you do got Death trying to capture her soul, and she's trying to stand in the way of it. But a really, well told story. I really dug it. Highly recommend it. It's got a 7.0 on IMDb. Now, that seems about right. So, anyways, number 8, Ferryman Maria. Sorry, just took a drink. All right, so now we move on to number 7. And this is The Man Who Changed His Mind. This is a British film. The scientist develops a way to basically transfer minds into other bodies. Like he can swap the minds between bodies. However, what happens is the guy who's kind of funding all this pulls out his money and just pisses off Boris Karloff, and he goes mad. He becomes another mad scientist, if you will. This movie is also known as The Man Who Lived Again, and that's actually how I found it, even though the original title is The Man Who Changed His Mind. But when I looked for it on Roku, it came up as The Man Who Lived Again. Only other production known on this one before I get into my review, I guess. The main actress, Anna Lee, who played the main girl, she was actually married to the director at the time. I think they divorced, in the next decade. I think they divorced in the 40s or whatever. But she was, married to the director, so that's kind of how I guess she got the role here. But she does good. I mean, I'm not trying to knock her. She does really good here. I'll tell you right now, Boris Karloff is just so fucking amazing. And I'm gonna even say, even though I guess he's considered an icon and a legend, I think it's a shame we don't talk about him as much today. Because I think, if you go back, 30, 40, 50 years, people probably talk more about Karloff, than ever, because he's flat out just a fucking legend. But I think today we kind of forget about these long-lost heroes of horror. The guy was just a great actor. And that thing is, I think, even in movies that maybe weren't as great, and I'm not saying this one. This one, I really dug the story here. I like the movie here. But I think even in movies I've seen him in where maybe the story wasn't that good. For me personally, I didn't care for the Black Room. I thought he did great in it. And again, there's not one bad performance from this man at all this year. And he's in like 2 or 3 of these films from 1936. Like the guy he was a fucking worker, man. Again, kind of a generic story. I will say this movie did. Like, you knew, especially in this era, because we don't start letting the bad guys kind of win or anything until much later. We're talking, late 60s, and then definitely in the 70s, you start letting the villains come out on top. So the bad guy's going to get his comeuppance. And, even though you kind of sympathize with Boris Karloff here, because, again, he is brilliant, and they rush him, again, because they want to put on because, they're the money people, and they're like, hey, you got to put on a display, you got to show us why we're giving you this money, and he tells them, like, hey, it's too early for, doing these kind of, trials or whatever. They force his hand, it fucks up, and then guess what? They're getting mad, and they're like, you're crazy, and they, withdraw his funding. So you do feel bad for Karloff. However, he is the villain. Like, he eventually goes crazy, decides he's going to get his vengeance. He ends up killing the guy who, took the money from him and everything. And in the end, because he kind of, the assistant, the only one who kind of believed in him, even though she knows what he's doing is wrong, she does still believe in his ability and skill. And I don't know if he necessarily falls in love with her. I think he just more or less, he falls for the fact that there's somebody else in this world who has his vision and his passion. And so he decides he's going to swap places with her fiance. I can't remember if it's fiance or husband. I think it's his fiance. But he's going to trade places, and he does momentarily. But when I'm watching this, I'm thinking, like, okay, I know he's not going to get away with it, but fuck, how's he, he's got to get away, he's going to do it. Like, it looks for a minute like, yeah, he's going to get away with this. Like, he just switched places with, and I think if this movie would have been made later, they probably would have done the story like that where, you think they get it in time, but then it turns out, nope, he swapped places. However, the assistant, she knows what she's doing, so she's able to incapacitate both and, switch them back or whatever. No, just really good performance by Boris Karloff. Again, I'm going to tell you right now, if you are a fan of horror, and I don't care if you do look down on these older movies or whatever, you need to study Karloff. Like, the guy is just a brilliant fucking actor. So, this movie has a 6.6 on IMDb. And, earned it. Earned every bit of that. Taking a drink. I'm so unprofessional when I do the show. It's ridiculous. All right. So at that was number 7, The Man Who Changed His Mind. I read the title. Again, I don't know most of these movies before I watch them. And so I literally had no idea, like, anything about this movie. So when I heard the title, The Man Who Changed His Mind, like, what the fuck? Like, is it like an indecisive guy? Like, that's his whole thing. It's like, I can't decide. I had no idea they meant literally. But anyways, good movie. Moving on now. Number 6, Le Gollum. This is Slovakian. I can never say that. Of course, we know the story of the Gollum. This rabbi creates the Gollum out of clay, and it comes to life to protect the Jewish people of Prague who are being persecuted at the time. This is also known as the Man of Stone, and that's actually, again, that's the title I saw it under when I watched it. So this thing, kind of interesting to note here. This thing was released on 2 different versions for. Now, you remember, this is the this is actually when this happened was more in the 40s, but it was released in 8mm and 16mm film reels for home watching. So, like, back in the 40s, if you had a projector at your home, this was like the first like horror film, or one of the first horror films to have like an at-home release. So yeah, years before VHS made it popular, this little Czech film was one of the first ones. And I think it was a condensed version of it. I think they released like a shorter version of it, but still, yeah, that's still pretty cool. This is I don't know if you want to call it, I read it in 2 different ways. Some people say it's a sequel to the 1920 version. 20s, I think it was 26, wasn't it? No, 20. It was actually 20 version of the Gollum. Some people say it's a remake. I don't know. I think it's more of a remake than anything else. However, I mean, I don't know. I guess it could be a sequel. Because, again, we don't actually see the Gollum being created. We find it like in a storage somewhere. So I guess it's very possible that after the events of the first movie, they go ahead and get it and move it over. But again, I guess they were doing this shit. Cause I complain about horror movies today with the prequels or sequels having the exact same title as the original. You know, we did the thing with The Thing and Halloween, and it's like, fuck you guys, come up with a unique title instead of just trying to pass it. I don't know. But they were doing it back in the 30s too, so I guess we can't really, talk shit about it or whatever. This thing came out some good reviews actually when it came out. Me personally, I enjoyed it. But it does start off so excruciatingly slow. In fact, there's no Gollum to be had until like the last 15 minutes or so. Like an hour goes by this film with nothing hardly. But what I will say is, and it's kind of unique, it's a little look into the times, I guess. Because this is a co-production. I said Czech, but this is actually funded by the French, I believe. But look at the times, and so you're seeing these Jewish people really, because I mean, even though that was kind of the theme of the first Gollum, of the Jewish people, not necessarily the people themselves, but just that neighborhood was being kind of attacked, and the Gollum was created to protect them. But here it just feels so much darker, just because we are during the era of World War II and the Nazi regime. And so it does kind of give it a different layer of subtext here. Not even subtext, it's just text at this point going over top of it. So you're seeing that, and I think that kind of adds to this. However, like I said, the movie itself, it plays more melodramatic than anything else. However, what I do like is the villain, and I don't remember names or anything like that. I apologize. But the main bad guy here, they give him moments where even they try to, I don't know if they're trying to make him sympathetic, I guess they kind of are, but it's almost like, he knows what he's doing is wrong, but he also feels like the reason he's doing it is right. He's conflicted. And I don't know, I like the fact that they try to give him a little bit more layered than just, I'm just evil for the sake of being evil. Like, no, he's a person. And I feel like a lot of the characters in here are really well written. But I'll be honest with you, this movie drags on until it's all looking bleak. They got the Jewish revolution squashed. Most of them are in prison, about to be executed. and the young girl, she's the girlfriend of the leader of the revolution. She ends up saying the magic words and bringing the Gollum to life, and this motherfucker goes on a rampage, and it is awesome. He's breaking through walls, and in the dungeon where they have the Jewish people held, it's right next to this lion enclosure. And presumably, I guess they throw them into the lion pit. We used to have the Christians back in the day, so I guess, the Jews are getting theirs in this movie. But they had this, lion caged off area. And so we get this scene where, the dude breaks through the lion wall. The lions get out, but they, bypass the Jews and go right. It's almost like they knew, who the bad guys were, and they go right after the people. And I'm not sure who these other people are supposed to be. I'm not sure... I'm not even sure who, Prague, who are the, I don't know. I'm again, not good with my history or geography, for that matter. I'm an ignorant American. Sorry, guys. But, so I'm not sure I don't think you're supposed to be Germans, though. I think it takes place a little bit further back than that. But either way, these lions just start, and you actually see it now. I'm sure they were trained some sort. I mean, they clearly weren't just, let loose lions, but I mean it's real lions and real people, and you see the lions jumping on them and getting mauled and shit. So I mean it looks really cool. Again, the Gollum just starts going through them. Come up and scene's great because you got this one guy who was Jewish, but he kind of turned on his own people and joins the bad guys. And the main leader, he's this fat fuck, and he's just he's cheating on his wife with these 3 girls at once. And the night of the execution, he's just partying, throwing a big celebration, and of course the Gollum busts that shit up, and he kills everyone. Throws one dude out the fucking window. It's awesome. I will say, like I said, compared to the first one, or I guess not the first one, but the last Gollum movie, this one definitely amps up the action, amps up the destruction, the mayhem in the end, and for that alone, I gotta say this is probably my favorite Gollum movie thus far. But it really is just that last, 15 minutes or so. Leading up to it, it can be a bit of a snooze fest. But if you're going to watch it, stick with it. That's all I can say. This thing has a 6.3 on IMDb. And yeah, seems about right. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. That was Le Gollum. So, going on to number 5, we have The Invisible Ray. American. Finally had all these foreign films, but guess what? We're going to round it all off with American movies. We're back in America. This is, this guy, a scientist, he discovers a brand new element called radium X. However, he gets infected by it, gets exposed to it, and it turns him into, you guess it, a mad scientist. So originally... so this is another pairing of Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, and it's fucking awesome. This is really originally supposed to be Bluebeard, however, the pirate, and Karloff was going to play Bluebeard. I'm not sure who Lugosi was going to play, but either way, it was supposed to be that movie. And for whatever reason, I haven't discovered why yet. I didn't read why. Or couldn't find why, but Bluebeard just didn't happen for whatever reason. So basically, they got together and decided, okay, we gotta get another movie with these guys in it, and so they came up with The Invisible Ray, and that's where they end up going to. They were trying to rush this, and it turns out at the time Universal was going through a studio change. The head of the studio was switching over. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on, but they're hurry up trying to get as much stuff passed before the sale or before the takeover, and so this thing was getting rushed crazy. Turned out, so the original director, and I forget who they got to try to direct it first, he quit. He was just nope, they're trying to make it too quick, and I don't want to do that. So he walked off the set, and they went up replacing him with I think the guy's name was Lambert Hillier, if I'm not mistaken. Taking a drink. Mouth gets dry the older I get, I swear. So anyways, so they replaced him with Lambert Hillier. But the funny thing about that was, this movie ended up going over budget and over scheduled anyways. Crazy And so, I don't want to say it was the most expensive movie they'd done at this point, but it was close to it. And they weren't, anticipating it to be. So, I don't know, thought that was kind of funny anyways. But either way, when this thing came out, it did get, good reviews regardless. So, they had that going for it. Some production notes here. We got the cathedral that was used in the Hunchback of Notre Dame that Universal did was reused here as the church in this movie. Of course, there's a famous story about Boris Karloff being pranked on the set of this movie. Basically, they had this the scene where he's being lowered into the volcano pit to extract this radium X, and of course they put him in this lift. They lift him all the way up to the top, and then they fucking go to break. And there's like, and so anyway, they left him up there during lunch, and so it turned out he was very he thought it was very funny. He got the rib. He was okay with it. No hard feelings. But some sources say that the actor Francis Drake, who plays kind of the main character in here, aside from Karloff and Lugosi, he's like the third, if you will. They always have like that extra guy who's just like the love interest who just comes off boring as fuck. That's this guy. Apparently, he didn't think it was too funny, though. He was the one of them that was kind of pissed about it. But again, Karloff kind of laughed it off. It's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. It's a dick move, especially someone that prestigious. Like, at this point, too, it's like, Boris Karloff's the fucking man. But at the same time, it's like, if that's something they just did, as long as he's cool with it and laughed it off, hey, no hard feelings right there. Speaking of that scene where they lower him into the volcano pits, that would actually get reused in the Phantom Creeps with Lugosi. And they just basically swapped it out. So it looks like, in that movie, even though it's Karloff being lowered into the volcanoes, they pretend like it's Lugosi for that movie. So kind of unique that, these two guys will always be connected. And that's another connection right there. It's like, yep, Lugosi. Technically, Karloff stood in for Lugosi for that scene. So kind of neat. And then, of course, we mentioned the cathedral earlier being reused. The lab in this movie was used for, this year, actually, the 1936, was used twice again. Once in Flash Gordon and another in Dracula's Daughter. So, yeah. This movie I absolutely loved. This kind of combines a couple of the genres, or subgenres of horror, if you will. Not only did it have the mad scientist, trope, it also had the terror in the tropics, element. We're deep in the jungles here. And, I don't know, again, I think the story's really good, even though it's very predictable, and again, it's going by the formula. It's still a good story, and honestly, Karloff and Lugosi are awesome in this. So that's the thing, too. Even though when they first started doing these movies, pairing, they always, for the most part, I think maybe once Lugosi got top billing, but for the most part, they always gave top billing to Karloff. But it seems like, especially right now, they keep swapping villain and hero each time. Good guy, bad guy, they kind of swap them around. And Lugosi, who I rarely saw as a good guy in movies. Like, I see more Karloff, I guess, as a good guy in movies than Lugosi. But we saw him as the good guy in, Black Cat? And again here in The Invisible Ray. And I think he does really good as kind of the good guy. And I think because of his accent, people kind of blow him off as not being that good of an actor. And I don't think that's fair, especially when you see this movie. I feel like, he had a good performance in Black Cat, but I think he's definitely really good in this. I think as far as like a good guy goes, he does his best work here. I don't know. I thought Lugosi did really good as well. Again, two icons, two legends, and it's just kind of a shame that the studio was definitely favoring Karloff over Lugosi. Now, I don't know. From the stories I'm hearing, it seemed like Lugosi, even though they were treating him unfairly, he didn't want to play ball. Like, a lot of time they would, offer him, they try to lowball him, and he'd be like, I'm taking my ball, I'm going home. And it's like, well, bro, that's why they're not picking you up on the second, third, fourth movie or whatever, and it's going to be harder to even get work after that. So I kind of feel like, I don't know, he may have had a bit of an attitude, whereas Karloff, from everything I've read, it seemed like he was more grateful. Like, Lugosi had this chip on his shoulder. He's like, I was a Hungarian, stage actor, and I was a leading man, and kind of a sex symbol over there, and I deserve to be that over here, and he got stuck in horror. Karloff, who, by the time he even got famous, he was already like in his 30s or 40s. Like, he was kind of a late bloomer. He was just grateful, and he didn't care that he was typecast in horror. He was just like, hey, I'm working, that's great. And I feel like it's the attitude that really separates the two, and I think that was probably the leading factor. I could be wrong, that's just my own opinion. I'm just saying that's how I look at this. But this movie was really good, and it had that other element of, and I don't even know what you call this, I mean, I guess revenge. It's a revenge film, even though it's kind of unwarranted revenge in this case. But when Karloff, he loses his wife, he loses, his science and his credibility and all that shit, the expedition, and he decides, he goes after, because at this point, because the radiation not only is it making him glow, and he has a killer touch to him, he's also going insane as well. And so, he sees these 7 statues, and he's like, or was it 5? I can't. It's 5 or 7. He's like, there were 7 of us on that expedition, and now, as I destroy these statues, I too will destroy, the people on this expedition. And he does. He goes through them one by one, and it reminds me a lot of like Dr. Fives, the abominable Dr. Fives, or Dr. Fives Rises Again. Either way, either one of those, I like that. So I don't know. I really dug this movie. I'm not one to go against the Academy. We are all in this together. That's the whole point of this is it's a group effort. We're collaborating. I'm just kind of the spokesman of this group. I would have had this probably be my number 1. Just saying. This probably would have been my number 1 movie of 1936. I respect what becomes number 1. And I think in the mainstream, what ends up being number 1 is probably the right choice. I'm just saying from a personal aspect, The Invisible Ray was way better than I thought it would be. And I feel like it does not get... I feel like a lot of these old movies don't get the credibility they deserve. Or the credit, I guess I should say, they deserve. And I really think that's kind of the point of doing the show, is to shine a light on these older films. So yeah, if you get a chance, you can find this on Roku as well. The Invisible Ray. Check it out. This thing has a 6.5 on IMDb and has a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes. Both of those seem very low to me, but hey, it is what it is. So The Invisible Ray is number 5. At number 4, we have The Walking Dead. Another American film. This is about a Boris Karloff again. He plays a ex-con, and he ends up getting framed for murder, and he's innocent. Like he had, didn't do anything, to deserve it. And he gets brought back from the dead after they execute him by the scientist, and some shit goes down. This movie, they said, was when they wrote it, I guess the guy who wrote the screenplay pretty much beat by beat stole a lot of the not the story, but the beats from Frankenstein. In fact, the character, when he gets the Boris Karloff played, when he gets brought back from the dead, he had no speaking role at all. Like he was, that's the one thing he lost in the transition. However, Boris Karloff's like, yeah, this is too close to Frankenstein. Like, you want me to be Frankenstein here, and that's not Frankenstein. And so they actually end up writing him in some line, but I think it was the right choice. But there's even a line in here where when they bring him back to life, the guy who brings him back to life is like, he's alive. And it's just like, and that's all I could think of. Was like, I didn't even know when I watched this. I get my notes after I watched the movie, and I was just like, holy shit, like this is very reminiscent of Frankenstein. And then when I read that, I was like, well, there you go. That's exactly it. This one, surprisingly, did not get any good reviews when it came out. Like, this kind of got crapped on, which I do not get at all. Time for my little review of this. Much like The Invisible Ray, and, well, hell, even kind of going back to The Man Who Changed His Mind, it really did remind me a lot of, those early, mad scientist type films. Again, it follows the same formula. But I enjoyed this one. And this one, again, this is one of those where, Karloff, he is innocent, but he has this power. And, like, 'cause when he gets brought back, something supernatural tells him who framed him, who set him up. And he ends up going after them. And they end up dying, but in weird, accidental ways. But it's clear that he's kind of causing it. I thought this was really good. I was honestly surprised that this got such shit talked about it back then. But hey, it is what it is. I really enjoyed it. I thought this movie was really good. I would recommend it. The Walking Dead, not to be confused with the zombie TV series. No, they had the title first back in 36. So this thing had a 6.6 on IMDb, and it grossed $300,000, which I'm not sure if that's good or bad for 1936 money, but either way, it is what it is. So yeah, The Walking Dead, number 4. So that brings us now to our number 3 movie, winner of the Bronze Skull Award. I'm talking about The Devil Doll. Movie is about this guy who's ex-con. Of course, he is innocent, much like Karloff in the last movie. And he comes out and he's trying to get revenge on the people who put him away. And he does it through little tiny humans that this scientist, co-convict, I don't know what you call that, but the guy who's in the jail with him, creates. So, yeah, he's using these little miniatures to go around killing the people who put him away. So this thing, when it came out, also was not a financial success, which was crazy to think about. But the reviews were split. And I noticed that even today, like the reviews at the time were split, and now it's kind of the same. And it's just like, I don't get that. The people who did like it, the one thing that they all kind of agree on is A, Lionel Barrymore's performance was top notch, and B, the special effects are great. And I gotta tell you right now, that is the one thing I really dug was the special effects. I'm not saying like they're cutting edge or like that, but for the time, yeah, they were, and they actually look good and they hold up to a certain degree. I would much rather see effects done like this than CGI. In all reality, it looks that good. Now, again, you can kind of tell, it's a screen. They're laying one shot over another to give the impression that these little people are tiny or whatever. But no, I think it looks great, and I think honestly, yeah, that's kind of, I don't know. I think it's way better than CGI. I'll say that. Lionel Barrymore does phenomenal here. Again, this one kind of goes. I mean, there's it's definitely horror in it. I won't say there's not, because there clearly is. But again, they focus more on the character here, and they literally do. It's definitely more of like a character study, a drama, if you will. And because not only is he just a man who's been wrongly accused, that's not his driving reason. His driving reason is because his name was dragged through the mud that his daughter hates him. Because of this whole thing, it forced his wife to commit suicide. And so the daughter blames him. And the daughter's working like 2 jobs, and they're not good. Like, one's at a laundromat, and the other one, she's working like I think they're kind of dancing around. They're trying to say it's like a gentleman's club kind of thing. They didn't come out and say she was a stripper, but, I don't know if she's just a waitress there or what, but she's not happy with it. And she blames him for everything. And so he's got more motivation than just that. Whereas the guy who he breaks out with, he's just a mad scientist through and through. Like, it is just kind of like he's stereotypical. He's just like, I'm going to make the whole world tiny. That's his plan. He's going to make the whole world small, but leave everything else big. That way our food supply could last forever. I don't know. It's wacky as shit. And what's even wackier is, like, he somehow talked his wife into being just as crazy as him. Because what happens is when the old man gets out, he dies. Like, he's just old age, gets his heart too excited, goes down. And so he talks Lionel Barrymore, or the wife does, talks him into carrying it on. He only wants to carry it on just so he can use these little miniatures. That's why he's doing. What happens is, and they do yada yada over the science, but they shrink people down. But the thing is, their brains are so small that it just makes them brainless. But somehow you can psychically control the little people with your own mind. Again, they don't explain how that's even possible. They yada yada over it, but whatever, we're going along with it. So they use it as a front. Lionel Barrymore and the wife. I should mention the wife too. They said that when they made the movie, they based her character on 2 pre-existing horror icons: Igor from Frankenstein, the Hunchback assistant, and the Bride of Frankenstein. And so the actor, I forget the actress's name, but Melita, I think is what the character name is. She has a slight hunch when she walks, and then she has this white streak in her hair. She looks iconic as fuck, and how like that character didn't live on is kind of beyond me. I guess because this movie bombed and was splitting audiences, it just got forgotten. But anyways, no, she, I think, deserves to be up there in that list of great horror characters from this time period. But anyway, so yeah, he's just wanting to use these little people, and they pretend that these are toys, is what they pretend it is. And so everybody thinks these are like, toys that are voice operated, like you can control them with your voice or whatever. And so he's using that to infiltrate and attack each of these people, and it's working. This thing, again, this is kind of a precursor, I guess, even to like tiny horror films like Puppet Master or Terror Toys or whatever, Full Moon toy, dolls, Doll Man, all those. This seems to be a precursor to that. Like, I'm not saying we wouldn't have those without this film, but you gotta think they drew some inspiration from it. And it really is like it's so good. Yeah, I tell you right now, I'm a big fan of this movie as well. I think this is definitely needs to be more talked about. Honestly, this could have been number one, honestly, and I wouldn't have argued as much because I think it's actually better than what winds up being number one. Again, it kind of steps away from the horror because usually in these horror films, when you have even if the mad scientist is killing for a just reason, usually he'll get his in the end because it's almost like you shouldn't be playing God or whatever, and that's your punishment. But here we actually get kind of he makes it through because he ends up having to accidentally kill Melita because she goes crazy when she finds out that he wants to just leave, and the lab blows up and she dies in the fire. And of course, they assume that she was the one that was doing all this, and so they kind of pin it on her and her husband. And so his name's clear. However, they're gonna, he knows they're gonna ask him like, well, where's you at during all this, and why didn't you step forward, and blah 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 blah. It's because he was killing everybody. And so what happens is when his name's cleared, the daughter forgives him, but unfortunately he can't be with her. And so, but he does get that final goodbye with her, and everything is kind of good between them. But then he has to disappear, and so it does end very bittersweet. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about this movie. Another one I really think people should check out. It's got a 7.0 on IMDb and a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. Again, I don't know, but still, The Devil Doll, winner of the Bronze Skull Award, number 3. So now we move on to, god damn it, we move on to number 2. The winner of the Silver Skull Award, Revolt of the Zombies. About a group of, another American film, but it's a group of people who have to go into Cambodia. Has to go into Cambodia to destroy the work of the scientist who's been turning men into zombies. So this is kind of the uncredited sequel to White Zombie. So apparently what happened was they decided to make a sequel to White Zombie and call it Revolt of the Zombies. However, certain producers, I guess the ones who were definitely, like the ones who were actually financing the movie, decided to sue because they were like, because the White Zombie was financially successful. Like, it did really well. And they decided, like, nope, we own the word zombie, which is so crazy to think about today. But I guess back then they're like, oh yeah, you can't do that. And so they were trying to hold up production of this thing. They would eventually kind of settle. They had to pay him some money, and but they couldn't say this was a sequel to it. So even though it is, it's also not. And so that was kind of, that was the whole thing there. I'll be honest with you, it's funny. I didn't realize this was supposed to be a sequel to White Zombie. I thought it was almost a prequel to King of the Zombies from the 40s. Or I guess not a prequel, but the first movie. I thought King of the Zombies was the sequel to this. I don't know why I thought that. I mean, they're very similar, I guess, in story and formula. And I really like King of the Zombies. Well, I guess we'll get into that when we get to the 40s. But Maitland Moreland, I'm a big fan of his. So, anyways, the weird thing about Revolt of the Zombies was Bela Lugosi was initially announced to be a part of this movie. However, he just wasn't. And I guess as time went on, they just, they quit mentioning him, and then he wasn't in the movie. In fact, he actually was in the movie, but just his eyes. So when they used the eyes from the White Zombie, they just used the same footage. And so when you see the zombified eyes given the powers, that's Lugosi's eyes, but he's not credited in this movie. How the hell did this get number 2? This is just, I don't know, boring. This is a boring movie. Just flat out. I guess this must have a soft spot in most of the Academy's heart because it got number 2. What the fuck? Anyways, past all that, it is what it is. Personally, I don't hate this movie. It's so dull. It's just so... And again, I guess because when I watched it back in the day, I watched it after I watched King of the Zombies. I enjoyed King of the Zombies. King of the Zombies had a fun vibe to it. This one, there's no fun. It's just boring. And I wasn't the only one that thought so, because it didn't even get close to either the critical or the financial, benefits of the first one. So it didn't hit any of those goals early on. In fact, this has a 3.4 on IMDb. That's right. The lowest ranked movie of 1936, and it's number 2 on our list. And it's got a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. So eat that. Yeah, Revolt of the Zombies, Silver Skull winner, number 2 horror film of 1936, I guess. So that brings us now to our number one horror film of 1936, winner of the Golden Skull Award. I'm talking about Dracula's Daughter. This is, of course, an American film. So basically, Dracula's daughter appears in London, and when weird shit starts going down, Van Helsing's like, well, she must be a vampire, and I gotta take care of her. Yeah, we talk about, Lambert Hillier, who did The Invisible Ray earlier. He did this movie as well. So this was a sequel to Dracula, a direct follow-up. And even though I guess they weren't technically linked then, later we would find out that, all the Universal monster movies were pretty much connected, as they would become connected later on. So it's a part of the Universal Monsterverse. Not the Dark Universe, which was a shitty reboot thing they tried to do later on, but the original OG version right here. So this was originally supposed to be based on the short story for Dracula's Guest. And accounts differ on this, but basically, I guess someone bought the rights to the short story. Because what it was, the short story itself actually wasn't necessarily a short story. It was actually a chapter that was left out of Dracula. Like, Bram Stoker just took the chapter out. I guess he figured he didn't need it. And then later, after his death, it was published as its own short story. And, this guy picked it up. David Selznick, I think is the guy's name. David O. Selznick. Either way, he snatches it up, and I think it's one of those things where he only did so, I'm guessing, because he honestly figured, like, oh yeah, they said he wanted to make, make his own movie of it or whatever. I think he's working for MGM at the time, and he was wanting to, do something with it. But some people are saying, well, he actually did that knowing that Universal would buy it up from him. And he ended up selling it for more than he bought it for, made a profit off of it, and then Universal got it. However, Universal just disregarded the whole thing and just basically made their own movie anyway. So again, I don't know. Kind of a weird little thing that, is what it is. This had to be rushed into production as well. Lambert Hillier, man, getting in those tight movies, I guess, or, tight production spots. Because that was the deal. The contract was if it wasn't completed by a certain time, the rights would revert back to MGM. So they had to hurry up and rush this into production as well. They originally wanted James Whale to direct it, but he did not want to do, because he just came off of Bride of Frankenstein. He didn't want to do back-to-back horror films. So he turned it down, which, I don't know. I kind of wish he would have done it. Don't get me wrong, this is a good movie. But it's just like, what if? What would have happened if he would have done it, But I guess we will never, really know. This was originally supposed to have Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, and Colin Clive, bringing in all the heavyweight hitters in this movie. But for whatever reason, they all just kind of didn't appear in this one. For whatever reason. I'm guessing because Karloff was James Whale's boy, maybe even Colin Clive as well, so maybe they felt a sense of loyalty there, and if he wasn't going to be in it, they weren't going to be in it. Maybe Lugosi was just like, I deserve more money, because I know they actually when you see Dracula in his coffin, it's a wax dummy of Lugosi, and I think he got paid for his likeness, so it's like, I don't know, would it have been cheaper just to, I don't know. Either way, though, none of them were in this thing. So I mentioned earlier that, the censors won, and that's kind of the end of horror. Well, that's not fully true. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. Yes, the Hays Code was cracking down big time on these horror films. However, and if I'm getting these names mispronounced, I apologize, but the original, head of Universal, that Carl LeMay, I'm going to say LeMay, he loved horror films. That was his thing, dating back to, Phantom of the Opera. He saw big money in these things. And with Frankenstein, Dracula, boom, Universal Horror was born. However, when the studio finally changed heads and it, got bought out by, this other company, and, they still ran it as Universal, but now, there's a different guy in charge. That guy despised horror. And so this was kind of the last horror film to come out from them. And everyone else just kind of followed suit when they saw that Universal wasn't making them. It was almost like, well, fuck it, everyone's cracking down on these things. There's no point in doing it. And that's kind of why this thing dies that death. Horror dies for 2 years after this. Not until 1939 that we see another horror film. So we get 2 solid years of nothing, which is so sad. But it is what it is right there. So this movie had split reviews. Some people liked it, some people didn't. Of course, it's constantly being compared to Dracula. funny thing is, Dracula is definitely more iconic, but as far as film goes, filmmaking in general, this is definitely a much better movie, and that's kind of one thing that the critics kind of split on. I guess most people felt like, well, this wasn't as good as Dracula because it didn't have Bela Lugosi, but they're like, it's a better made film. However, it did not make the money that Dracula made, and that may be another reason why this movie didn't do great. However, they also agreed though that Gloria Holden, who plays Dracula's daughter, did great. Rumor has it she did not want to be in this movie. She also looked down on horror. But some people think that's why she does good in this, because she kind of has this attitude throughout, and of course the attitude is like she doesn't want to have the curse of being a vampire. In reality, she just doesn't want to be in the movie. But either way, she took it and it worked with it. This movie has been very influential throughout history, or throughout the rest of horror, because Anne Rice has often cited this as one of her biggest influences when she wrote her vampire movies. And then some people have said that the obviously not the story, but kind of the structure of the story is very close to the 1950s film Sunset Boulevard. So it's like who knows, but I mean, a lot of people have kind of pointed that out. So, and I've seen Sunset Boulevard. I was not a fan. I don't remember, being honest with you, so I really can't comment on that. But I don't know. Enough film historians and critics are saying it, so there must be something there. And then finally, this would be remade in 1994 as I may mispronounce this, Nausea. And I also thought The Hunger, wasn't there like a vampire movie that had David Bowie in it? Am I making this up? I thought that was kind of based on this too. I could be wrong, but either way, yeah. So really the only other kind of production that I can mention on this thing was, we talk about subtext and themes and whatever. And of course, we've talked before that, sometimes filmmakers don't even put those in there, but they come out. Well, this was the opposite, because there is a big lesbian theme that runs through this. However, that was not by accident. That was intentionally thrown in there. They, even though this is based on, or supposed to be based off of the Dracula's Guest, chapter or story or whatever, this was actually had a lot more in common with Camellia, if I'm pronouncing that right, Camellia, which is, the original lesbian vampire, if you will. And it had a lot, similarities with that. The production crew, or sorry, the production code, the Hays Code people, they knew what was going on, and they even said, like, listen, if you're gonna make this movie, you need to alter a lot of the scenes. And so there's like scenes with Dracula's daughter's house guest, or sorry, housemaid, and her there's a scene where she's modeling the necklace for her or whatever, and she's supposed to be nude initially, and they're like, yeah, you can't do that. You got, and of course, I don't think it would have shown anything. I think it would have been implied, but they're like, you can't even imply, you can't imply nothing here. And so they made them take out a lot of stuff there, but even when you take that stuff out, the subtext is definitely still there. And the same goes whenever, she kidnaps the main girl at the end and takes her back to, Transylvania. Same thing, it's clearly there's a lesbian lust there from Dracula's daughter, but again, only in our imaginations and our fantasies. We cannot, imply that at all. I personally like this movie. I think I'm in the group that thinks this is better than Dracula. Again, not much horror. It's definitely more fantasy, or sorry, more drama. But there's one scene in particular when they walk into the room and she's sitting in the bed and she's just looking right at you, and it's like at the camera. It is the most chilling scene in a Universal horror film. Like it catches me off guard each time, and it runs chills down my spine. I really like this movie. Again, I don't know if I would have made it number one, but it is a damn good movie. It's got a 6.3 on IMDb, a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes. But no, it is our number one horror film of 1936, winner of the Golden Skull. So, brief recap, if you will. Washington Irving and Warner Cross were both inducted into the Horror Hall of Fame. And then at number 9, we had El Burro Macabro. At number 8, Ferryman Maria. At number 7, The Man Who Changed His Mind. Number 6, La Gollum. Number 5, The Invisible Ray. Number 4, The Walking Dead. Number 3, winner of the Bronze Skull, The Devil Doll. At number 2, winner of the Silver Skull, Revolt of the Zombies. And number 1, winner of the Golden Skull, Dracula's Daughter. So guys, that is it for 1936. Tune in next time. We will look at 1937, even though there's nothing going on there. But we will have inductions into the Hall of Fame. So it will be a short episode, but hey, we're still going to do it. So you cannot keep a horror podcast down. So anyways, until next time, I've been Daniel Richardson. This is the Retro Horror Academy, and you're dismissed.